Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel. That way, when I release more videos like this, you'll get notified. So, hey, it's Betsy Jordyn, and I am here with my treasured colleagues, Lori Smith and burnout expert, Rachelle Stone. And we're talking about the implications of burnout from people who work at home. So thank you guys so much for being on the show. And I would love to explore this concept around why we get burnt out when we left the office and we left our 9 to 5 to get work-life balance, but we're burning out on our own. So Rachelle, I'm gonna have you kick it off since this is your area of expertise.
Okay. Well, are you looking for me to share why I think people are burning out at home, working from home, is that where you want to start?
Can you share a little bit more about your background and how you became a burnout expert?
Sure.
And a little bit about your story and your business. And then let's get into a conversation around the realities of burnout in working at home, which is the irony of the whole thing.
It really is ironic, isn't it? Well, so I actually have been working from home since 2014. Before then, I was, I think, 27 years as a destination management owner and executive in the South Florida area. And that is an industry specific to the meeting, convention, and special event industry. So I did about 175 to 225 meetings a year. And it was constant and I loved it. And I was very passionate about what I did. And one day in 2014, this is the penny version, not even the nickel version. One day in 2014, I literally just said, I think I've maxed out in my career. I don't think I can go any further. I can't do anything else. So instead of resigning and going to do something else, I instead retired at 48. I was prepared, like 6 months savings, like they always say. But about a couple months into it, I started exploring another industry called coaching. And I dipped my toe into that pond just to kind of take a starter course to see what it was all about. And about 3 weeks into that training, it was like a light bulb moment, epiphany, whatever you want to call it. I realized that I did not choose to leave my career. I had actually burnt out. I was like a frog in a pot of water. Somebody had turned the heat on high and just left me there to boil over it. I didn't even know it. And it was probably another 2 years before I could say it out loud, before I admitted what happened to me. And Betsy, I think you were the first person I admitted it to professionally when we met. And so now I wear it like a neon sign around my neck. I spent a lot of time really cracking the code on what happened, doing a lot of research, talking to a lot of people that have been through the same. And now I work in that arena. I speak about it. I coach around it. I also do leadership coaching as well. But it's really my passion to prevent others from going through what I went through.
I mean, that is really powerful because I remember when we were going through your branding experience, that we got to like breakthrough success without burnout. And then we started talking about it and there was like a mirror that was holding up, but I wasn't willing to admit my own burnout. Like I've had a long-term dance with burnout and I left Disney, I think, because of burnout. I've reinvented my business multiple times because of burnout. And I don't know if you experienced that as well, Lori, but I'm curious around like, what is the stigma around burnout? Like, why won't we admit that we have burnout? Why is this an issue?
Rachelle, I just want to add something to that before you chime in, because you're going to have the more professional response. From a personal perspective, I think, myself included, I feel like anyone who works in that kind of corporate grind, it's very easy to get pulled into burnout and you don't even realize it's happening. And I personally experienced, I think very similarly to both of you, I didn't realize that I had experienced burnout as well, but I definitely went through a phase of that where my whole life was around, trying to make sure that I was working my way up the ladder within that corporate environment, but at the same time manage all of the things that I was trying to do at home to perfection. And it is extremely exhausting when you try and manage both sides of your life to that level. And I think, I personally left, that corporate environment and started my own business for the reason that I said I wanted to have that balance. But I think what started this conversation amongst the three of us is, well, now I'm working from home and I'm supposed to have that balance, but I'm finding myself as I grow my business getting pulled back into having a hard time sometimes finding that balance. It's very easy to walk back into my office at 9 o'clock at night and pick up an email and start to do something. And before, maybe I used to check out when I was going into the office every day. So I definitely think that we all have that similarity.
Yeah.
So we all have
Mhm.
that similarity, but we have a stigma to it as well. Like, so it seems like what I'm hearing from you, Lori, is that it's easy for us to get caught up in the burnout is because that's part of the corporate culture that we've gotten acclimated to. And so somehow corporate culture says being busy and stressed out is good. And if you
Mhm.
are not busy and stressed out, it's not. And is that, Rachelle, like from your standpoint, like, why do we feel shame around this burnout? Why is it, if I had a broken leg and I needed to put a cast on it, I wouldn't feel embarrassed by that. But I have burnout and I desperately need to do self-care in other ways. Why is that a shameful thing?
Well, because it's not, burnout is not a dirty word, first and foremost. It is not. It is something that happens to us. We don't ask for it. But it is something that happens to us. And there is a huge stigma attached to it. And I think that stigma, like Lori was saying, that expectation, that drawing you into the whole work world. When we're children, we are growing up, our parents don't teach us how to set boundaries, right? That we have no boundaries with our siblings. Our siblings have no boundaries with us. When we go into school, same thing. They don't teach you about how to take care of yourself, how to define values or purpose, and they only teach you to do the work. And when we go into the work world, again, we're still not learning how to set boundaries and get into alignment with who and what we are. And women especially, there's a huge stigma attached to, because women, I read a great book it's called Burnout, the Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And it's by Amelia and Emily Nagassi. And they're twin sisters. And one of them went through burnout. One of the things that they said that I thought was so incredibly fascinating is that women in particular have something called human giver syndrome. So as children, we grow up and boys are raised to, take care of themselves, go off to school, get a great job, get married, take care of their family. Women are raised to, take care of themselves, go to college, get a nice job, get married, and start a family and take care of the family. That's our upbringing. That's the messaging we get. And the reality is it's contradictory to what the other conversations which are going around, which are women are not treated with equal, they're not in equal positions in the work world. There's not enough female CEOs. There's not enough female managers. How can these men be making all these decisions for all these women? Yet we burn out quicker because this is my take on it, and it ties into the human giver syndrome, is that because we're never taught how to behave interacting with the way we feel. It's not a skill that's taught.
I did this series. I totally validate everything you're saying. I did this series several years ago about high achieving women and burnout. And I got a little bit into the biology. I was like fascinated because I read this book about the female brain. And what the female brain book said is like with extra responsibility requires extra testosterone, and women make a fraction of it. So there's that particular issue. There's the reality of the mommy brain, and there's the reality too, of like the workplaces are created by and for men that support their mental processes and not the women. So is burnout is it everybody is like, what's the difference between stress and burnout? Because I experience burnout as a clinical thing versus just being stressed out. What do you both do? First off, Lori, do you agree as a mom with some of the things that I was saying around the biology and the role of becoming a mother and that complexity? And then Rachelle, I'd love to get your perspective on what the difference is between just being stressed out and busy and burnout.
And Lori, before you answer, I love three-way conversations because, at least. All right. So to the stress, the other piece that and I'm sure this was in the book, but I just want to bring it forward for your listeners. Stress needs to be processed. And it doesn't. What it does is it creates more cortisol. And that's where you wind up having all these physical issues because the stress isn't processed, which can lead to languishing, which can lead to burnout. That's putting all of the physical, mental ailments to the side. But that's the progression of stress, unmanaged stress.
So are you saying like, okay, there's this much stress that, is it like, do women and men have the same amount of stress? Because some of the things you're talking about is the caregiver syndrome, there's the
Well,
second, like, do we have the same amount of stress?
so men, because they do have higher testosterone, are able to manage stress better. And burnout shows up differently initially for men and for women. For women, it is more of an emotional drain. For men, it's that mental distancing from their job, that negativism, cynicism. And then for both men and women, it's the reduced efficacy, that feeling of futile. No matter what you do, you're never going to get ahead. It's never ending. It's unabating. So for women, it shows up emotionally first. And for men, it shows up as a disconnect first.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
So for women too, there's there's a certain amount of stress. So men, because they can compartmentalize and they have more testosterone, they could process the stress and it doesn't, and they can just detach. But for women, because they may have is it the same amount of stress or more stress, but the less testosterone, they can't process that stress and then they respond emotionally, which makes the burnout more significant. Is that accurate, or am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
Well, it's that we're not taught how to process stress. No one tells you to, how can you, when the stressor goes away, all right, let's say you're trying to get a pitch out to a client, you're waiting for some vendor information, it's due in 90 minutes, you don't have it yet. How are you feeling in your body just listening to that, right? Pretty stressed out. Okay, the vendor sends the proposal, you get your information to the client. Whew, dodged a bullet. The stress is still in your body. What are you doing to process it? Because it's stuck in your limbic system right now. So it's just all it's doing is depleting. You're not doing anything. What are you doing to replenish that depleted energy? Go for a run, kickbox, scream, go for a walk, right? That's one way. The other thing is, you know what, Mr. Vendor, we're not going to be able to work together in the future because you caused me an unreasonable amount of stress and I cannot go through that again. You're laying down a boundary. That's another way to
Yeah, and women have a hard time with that because they want to be pleasing.
That's right, because they want to please everybody.
So Lori, talk to me about being a business owner and a mom. Her kids are still pretty young. So it's like, Rachelle and I, our kids are now older. We're empty nesters, but you're still in the middle of it. Like, how does business ownership and motherhood, how does that work for you?
Oh, it's not always easy. I would say, I find myself having to constantly juggle, one thing to the next. I'm taking calls from the car. I'm, sitting in parking lots, waiting outside of practice, taking a Zoom call, so I feel like it is that constant battle of making sure that I'm providing everything that I intend to my clients, because I want to hold up, my ends of expectations and make sure that I'm, giving them the best of me that I possibly can, but I'm also trying to give the best of me to my children. So I think it's definitely not easy. And I find, I definitely, probably like so many other working mothers in the world, find myself being pulled in. And I think the benefit that I have is that I do have a strong support system. I have other family members who do try and help me out as much as they possibly can. But, as years go by and grandparents aren't able to, give as much as maybe they had when your kids were little, it's definitely something that, I feel falls more on the mother than it does on the father. Not that my husband doesn't try to support me and support the kids, but he also works from home, and he'll be more inclined to say, hey, I have a meeting, I can't do that drive to baseball practice. Whereas I try and find a way, well, he's got to get there, I'm going to find a way to get it done. Right. So I think there's just a difference in the way that I process my responsibilities as a parent and as a mother and as a business owner, and the way my husband, who does work for a company, so it's a little different, right? He doesn't maybe have the flexibility that I have, but it's still hard to create those barriers, as you said, Rachelle, right? The barriers between, what is on me, what is on him, and how do we manage it all?
Lori, you just perfectly described human giver syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And it to the point of the man is raised like, no, I can't. I've got to work.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like, no, I have to take care of the family.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I mean,
men
if
can
you were
say
to,
no and be fine with it. And a woman's like, I can't do that. I got to do
no,
everything.
no. And listen, my clients, they're the utmost of a priority to me, but my family is first. It's who I am. So if I have a kid standing in, I always refer to my door in front of me. It's a glass door and I see my children's faces through it. The moment I see them, a whole different part of me turns on, whether I'm on a call. If I was on this call right now with the two of you who are a priority to me, but if they walked up to that door, I couldn't help but look up, because that's just, it's just my human nature and my reaction. I don't know how to turn that off. Right.
So Lori,
So,
what sort of conversations do you have with your husband when there's a conflict in that there's a responsibility and you both have competing priorities? How do you work that out?
That's a great question.
yeah. Oh, and that's not an
Tell
easy
me.
question.
I'm
I
dying.
know. I wish I had
Tell
some
us
magic
more, right?
answer. I don't have a magic answer. I mean, I think it comes down to, if there's something that really conflicts with what I have going on professionally and with a client or, with my business, I think it does come down to, listen, there's those moments when I just cannot do it. Right. And I feel like then I just have to call on him and say, I understand that you're working from home and you have a meeting, but I think you need to try and rearrange your schedule to help in this instance. But 9 times out of 10, I'm usually the one to somehow find a way to give and make it happen. I mean, I'm being honest, and I don't think I'm probably unlike many others. So.
But in the pinch, when it's really called for, you will have that boundary conversation to say, look, I need you to step up and take help out.
Absolutely.
All right. That's good. That's great.
But it's like, I noticed even like when my kids were little, and if they were sick, it's like mommy brain kicks in. It's like, even if there is somebody to watch my child, like I remember when I was at Disney, we were in the middle of this huge, massive project, and we were doing all of these town halls, and they were super important. And I was supposed to be a part of this executive presentation, but my daughter Ainsley, at the time, she was really little, and she had a major asthma thing. Like we were in an emergency room, throughout the evening, and the next day, it's like I couldn't physically leave her, like her breathing, I couldn't physically leave her. And I remember I took a huge reputational hit to stay home with my daughter, but I didn't know how to not be with my daughter during that time. So there's like some of that conflicting kind of thing. It's like even in your scenario, Lori, like if your son needs to be somewhere, it's not about just giving him a ride. It's about like our identity and our self-esteem. And it's like, there's that emotional connection. I don't know if that contributes to the burnout. That it's like, is it just being the pleaser? Or is it just like, I can't imagine not wanting to be there for my kids?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination of both for me, right? Like I think, I don't know otherwise, and I think it's actually funny that we're having to some extent this conversation, because it's what I decided to somewhat build my business around. Because I think, Betsy, when you and I started talking about like what made me tick from like a professional standpoint, it was the fact that I've always my entire life had that I don't want to say pleaser, but like I want to make everything right in the world, right? I want to make sure that all the parts of an organization are working together. I want to make sure all the parts of my family are working together. I feel like who I am personally pulls through to who I am professionally. All the more reason, when you really think about it, that creating boundaries and having the on-offs between the two is very difficult for me, because they're both so important. It's very hard to, say, how do you not take a priority of your children over your professional life, right? So I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think there is definitely such a huge connection between the two.
Yeah, to Lori's point, they're intimately intertwined.
Yes.
If you ask somebody what their values are and they say, "Oh, well, these are my professional values and these are my personal values."
Oh,
No. You are one person.
Yeah.
You don't get 2 sets of values. And because of the crossover with home, it means the communication and the boundaries are all so much more important now. But again, no one's taught how to set a boundary. It's not about a line in the sand. It's about the impact of the other people's behaviors on you and stop that impact.
Before we get into the solution, because I definitely want to brainstorm towards the end of this conversation around what can we do about it. But I do want to talk about the entrepreneurial burnout. So I think what's interesting, at least in my experience with myself and mentoring, a bunch of other people going through the corporate to entrepreneurship kind of transition, is that what we do is we leave our job because we want work-life balance. And then what we do is we recreate our stress and we recreate our career in our businesses. So when I first started my business, I started making a ton of money right away, like big money. And so I had all these male mentors and they were like, hey, double your revenue, double your revenue. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Because I'm like, I'm competitive. I want to succeed with the big boys. But then I realized, like, I had my big assignment that I had in London. I had my first international client. And I was like, yay, and I was on the airplane and my friend's like, oh my gosh, you could savor this and you could live the dream. And I got to the other side. I got to my hotel. I called the kids. They were home with a nanny and I had an existential crisis. I'm like, this is not why I started my business. I did not start my business so I could have the nanny be watching my kids. I started my business because I wanted to be home with my kids. I did not want to miss out on stuff with my kids. And now I'm missing out. So I recreated my stress over and over again. And so why is it so there's no external pressure necessarily. I created my own pressure to succeed. Why do we do that? Yes, Rachelle.
Well, because you're only doing part of the recovery from the initial burnout. You're not doing the complete recovery. So while you're taking care of, okay, I want a different environment, you didn't make any changes to the alignment of your values and purpose. Your purpose is your children, right? Your passion. So what changes did you make to make that alignment with them? You just changed the location of where you were burning yourself out. Does that make sense? Yes. So there's three types of recovery. You have the internal, which is the reflective, the reorientation, the getting to know yourself again, the values alignment. And if you've never done values work, you got to do it. And those change over the years. So do look at it. It's clarity on your purpose. It's having some sort of creative outlet, and it's having social support outside of the office. The people you work with are your colleagues. They are not your social support system. Yes, they can support you, but they are not.
Right.
Need it outside. That your best allyship is outside of the office.
But this is like one of those things that I love what you're saying, because this is where I chose, like, why part of the reason why I pivoted my business from mentoring, from consulting to mentoring, is really pushing people to clarify these things, because
that's right.
I had male mentors who had no earthly idea about how I was wired as a mom, why that would be important, and why my goal was never to double my revenue. I don't care about becoming $1 million consultant. I care about having a good, a sustainable income for sure, and an impact, and having a total life. So there's some of it is like I surrounded myself with somebody who did not understand what that was and put a goal. And I just wanted, again, that pleaser syndrome. I wanted to please that external. I love this quote from Ali Wong where she says, do you ever watch the comedian Ali Wong? She's the best. She's hysterical.
Oh, yes, I have seen her. I know who you're talking about. I haven't seen her in ages, though.
I saw her stand up a few months ago, and she was talking about Sheryl Sandberg, and that lean in book. And she's like, I don't want to lean in. I want to lie down. Like, yes, that's what I want. I don't want that, I don't know about, for you guys, as you were building your businesses, did you get caught up in the success trap, or did you just, Rachelle, you did your values work beginning and you designed it differently, and you had me as a mentor, so I wasn't going to push you.
Well, and the other thing was, to your point, I wasn't looking for a six-figure business. I get emails all day, every day on LinkedIn. We'll help you build a six-figure practice, and hard pass. No, thank you. My goal was to build a career around the life I really wanted to live. So once I had clarity on those values and what my purpose was and my passions, then I was able to say, okay. And when I burned out, I was 25 pounds overweight and on 18 different medications. I was sick. I didn't even know it. I thought it was healthy because I was popping pills making me better, but I wasn't. So getting the physical health back, getting the mental health back, the clarity, the internal reflective recovery, and then the daily recovery. It's that daily recovery that people let go. Great, I'm all better. And they go back to work. They go right back into the grindstone. You can't. You have to set up that daily routine that's going to be taking care of your your mindfulness activity, your gratitude. There's real science behind that. They show growth in your in the prefrontal cortex and your gray matter. People who do mindfulness practices, gratituding, mental fitness, they have growth in that gray matter in the prefrontal cortex and shrinkage in the limbic system, which is where that's the fear response center. So yes, it matters, and it all matters, and it's part of every day, just like going to the gym and working out, or going to church, or your spiritual practice. Daily recovery. And all daily recovery is self-care. Like Lori, you've got a good support system. What do you do? What's your creative outlet? What do you do?
No,
What's your hobby?
as I'm listening to you talk, and I know you and I've talked about this before, Rachelle, the one thing I do not do enough of is self-care. I do not allow that time for myself. I've had this conversation with you. I've had it with my husband. I've had it with so many different people. And I still wish I could tell you that I have that outlet, but I don't yet. And that's on me for not making that a priority. And someone who speaks about prioritization all the time, I don't make myself a priority, right? But it's so true. It is so true.
We do stuff to ourselves we would never do to somebody else. Right?
No, I'll sit there and tell the best of my friends and colleagues and clients, right? Hey, you need to prioritize. You need to do you need to really focus on what's most important and not worry about, the things that kind of fall to the bottom, and be more thoughtful about where you spend your time. I tell everyone that. And sometimes, not sometimes, all the time when it comes to me personally, I don't do that. So honest.
Yeah. So it's like making sure, like, we're, as consultants and coaches, we're really good at understanding all the stakeholders' perspectives and integrating them.
Sure.
But then we forget to put ourselves at the table. I noticed, like, I burn out. I got sick over Thanksgiving for a whole week, and I missed out on a good portion. So the entire family came in town, and I killed myself before Thanksgiving. So I spent time thinking through every single person, like, okay, what kind of blankets would they want? What kind of food do they want? Do they want to have this? What kind of alcohol do they want to have at the house? What do we need to do? And I spent so much energy making sure everybody was happy. And then I realized, like, I forgot to think about myself. And there's so many easy things now in retrospect, after I kind of crashed and burned this last quarter between, my cross country move, becoming an empty nester, just a few stresses that were going on, and trying to do all of this. I'm like, I could have easily just assigned different people to take charge of different, different meals. I could have said, you're on your own, BYOB in the house, even though you're staying here. I mean, I could for sure make sure they have blankets and stuff, because we just moved here and I didn't have that, but I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it until I was sick all week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we always get sick after a vacation. We always get sick after a big major project and a push. Why? Because we're not processing the stress. We don't take that time between to recover. And it's not just about recovery. It's about refilling your tank. You're so depleted at that point. That's when you get sick instead of recovering.
So can we sidestep, like, if, let's say there's some people are in here who are listening in right now, and they're saying, all right, I'm in corporate, I want to leave because I want work-life balance. What would you say to that person? And then let's talk about, after the person who's already has their own business and they're burning out, what they can do. So what can the people who are in corporate, like you or Rachelle, like you or Lori, high pressure executive jobs, and they're burning out, like, what would you say to that particular person?
Well, first and foremost, are you saying they want to leave, or they just want to get out of the burnout or avoid the burnout?
They're envisioning starting their own business, like Lori did, as a way to get that balance.
Get out of corporate. Well, the first and foremost, that, I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but it's numbers. It's that 6-month savings. That's step number one, making sure you're prepared to step away, because you're going to have a whole new set of stresses when you do it. I would suggest working with a consultant or a mentor or a coach before you leave to help you get some of these things ready. It's almost like getting ready for retirement. You're not going to say, oh, I'm retiring next year. You're going to say, oh, my retirement's in 5 years. I have to start getting ready for that. I have to start planning for my future. So it's a plan.
So somebody do you feel like that would by getting that 6 month, plan, that working with a mentor or coach, that type of person, do you think that that would take the edge off of the burnout while they're trying to make a decision, or do they have to address the burnout first and then make the decision? Like,
You have to address the burnout first. But here's the thing, when you talk about recovery from burnout, which again, it's the internal, it's the external, and then it's the physical. Sorry, the internal, the external, and then the daily. What is self-care? That is self-care. So starting with the recovery to reset the system, building the daily habit and incorporating it into your life. So when you do start bringing things into your life again, the work and the stress, you have some boundaries already put in place.
So working with people like us is self-care.
Say that again.
Working with people like us is self-care.
Well, working with people like us holds you accountable to taking care of yourself.
Got it. So that's a tangible
we're not doing
action
it for them. It's ultimately up to the person, somebody like, there's always going to be those people when I say, put your oxygen mask on first, they're like, oh no, I've got 6 kids. I got to get the kid mask on first. Until they're ready to put their own mask on first. I've had at least, I would say in the last 3 years, I've had at least 4 clients who have come to coaching calls that were in burnout, that were not willing to start implementing change, share with me that they either passed out and wound up in the hospital and their doctor mandated 2 weeks without the laptop and the cell phone, or they were in a horrible car accident. You can't not deal with the burnout. You have to make change, or when you go through recovery, it'll be forced on you. So you have a choice. You can either choose to prevent it, or you can have it forced on you.
So, Lori, from your perspective, like, do you see that there was any early warning signs, like, that was stressing you out, like with the corporate schedule? Like, are there early warning signs that you could see before you would have a car accident and before you're, before you
right.
you're talking to a burnout coach? Like,
Yeah.
did you see any early warning signs?
For me, it's kind of interesting. Excuse me. I feel like, and you both know my story. I mean, I was undergoing a lot of change within the organization that I was in, like major organizational changes that resulted in me having to go out and figure out what my next step was. In retrospect, I didn't realize it until after the fact. It's when I looked back that I now realize how stressed I was, how burnt out I was. You were talking about getting sick. I did get sick. In that last year within that corporate role for me, I became very, very sick for a good month. I lost weight, didn't realize what was happening. It wasn't until I looked back and I was like, wow, look what I put my body through physically during that difficult time, right? So unfortunately, I didn't see the signs. And then when I was forced to make that change, I feel like it took me that good first 6 to 12 months to really get my head on straight, to look back, to see what I had gone through. The one thing that I was clear on, though, from the day that I began that next step and that next journey, was that I didn't want to go back to that environment. Like, I knew that from the very beginning. And I said, I want to try and do this on my own. I want to try and make myself, have a situation where I would feel like I had that balance with my family. That was like my number one priority. And I wanted sustainability. So before, Betsy, you were talking about, like, did I want that, like, really, really big, huge, successful business? My key word, and you and I talked about it many times, was always sustainability, right? Mm-hmm. And it's still my key word. I want to be able to sustain this so I can, be there for the next X number of years for my children's lives until I'm the empty nester. Yeah. So I think, for me, unfortunately, I didn't see it. And I think it took, looking back and having these conversations with folks like you for me to, like, really say it. I don't think I talk about it very often with others, to be honest. I feel, it's when you're kind of in that safe space and you're having the conversations with people that you trust and know get it. But I don't go back and have these conversations with former, folks that I worked with, or mentors, especially a lot of my male mentors. We don't talk about this. I don't know if they would recognize that it was as bad as it was for so many of us.
I think that's really powerful about the goal of sustainability and ongoing profits, rather than rather than like, I'm going to turn you into a 6-figure brand. Like I played around with some of that language in my value proposition because some of my competitors use that. And it's like, oh, you need to talk about like the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. I'm like, but that's not really what I want or what the people I want to attract with is. I could talk about purpose. I could talk about impact. I want to talk about sustainability because sustainability is just, you know, the bottom level of the Maslow. Like we need to have sustainable profitability, and we should be able to have the money to fund the higher levels of the Maslow. And I'm very clear that I don't want to, I'm not going to help you become $1 million consultant. My promise is I'm going to help you start the right business for the right reasons so that it achieves all of your total life priorities. That's what's important. But, you know, people are like, well, but you're not as results oriented. I'm like, well, that feels like a really powerful result. Like, doesn't that seem like a good result?
It's not your job to produce the results for their company. That's their job.
Right. That's true. Oh, that's another thing about burnout, like putting boundaries around products and services. So you don't overpromise, like where you step over and take responsibility for other people's stuff. But I think that's a really important thing is like being clear on that goal and not losing sight of it. I lost sight of it. And then I had to reinvent my entire business. I spent a ton of money having to reinvent because I had Accelera Consulting Group everywhere, you know, and I have to like fix everything to just make it like about my personal brand. But it's that importance of not recreating that stress. So Rachelle, from your standpoint, is somebody who, let's say somebody is leaving corporate because they are in a burnout state. They really want that lifestyle balance that you and Lori had pursued and that I wanted as well. In between that time period, when they're working on their business, what would you recommend so that they don't find themselves in the same exact spot as they were before?
Get a hobby. Seriously, what is your creative outlet? What are you doing to take care of your own soul? How do you fill your tank? So, like, kind of going back to Lori, it's her family. She's very clear. She wants sustainability so she can be there for her family. Her family is number one. That's probably your top value. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it, Lori?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So going to your boys' games, I would imagine, is a bit of a tank filler for you. And that you're sitting there on a Zoom call while they're playing is probably an energy drainer for you. Did I get that right?
Yeah. No, it is. It is.
Yeah. So it's going to have to be for Lori in particular. You know what, Mr. Client, my son has a game, so I won't be able to be on that Zoom call at that time. I can join you at this time. But again, it's being willing to set some boundaries around what you're most passionate about, because you need to fill your tank in order to be there for the client. And I have to go back to something Lori just said before. She didn't realize she was burnt out. She can look back now and see it. The reason you can look back now and see it, because we're talking about it now. We're not talking about it enough. That's part of the problem.
So good. Yeah.
People don't know what they don't know. And they think that, you know, quick story. One of my clients came to our first call like this, with her shoulders in her ears and like this in her chair. She was in finance and she was working from home. It was early in the pandemic. She was just, no, I'm here from 7 to 7. And do you go to the bathroom? Yes. Sorry, that's my brother's text message. And it turned out she didn't realize she could leave her desk to, instead of go to the ladies' room, go to the loo, she could start a load of laundry for her family. She could put a chicken in the oven for her family. She doesn't have to be sitting there from 7 to 7 and just taking 2 15-minute breaks during the day. No one teaches us that. No one told us that when we went home to work from home. And when you're in the office environment, it's go, go, go. It's never about you. And that it needs to go both ways. So now you have a lot of corporations that are offering wellness. Here's a free Headspace app. Here's access to coaching, which is great. They're really, really good. But the number one thing corporations can do for their employees is to let them build their own networks of support. It's not your colleagues playing on a baseball game with them on, you know, the office team or volleyball team, or let's all go out for drinks. Yeah, that's fun every now and then, but those are not your support system. Corporations have to start providing more opportunities for their human capital to be human.
Yeah, this is the OD consultant coming out of me. I would say the number one thing corporations should do is right size the workloads. Part of the
Yes.
reason why we're so stressed out is we're doing the
Absolutely.
job of 2 or 3
Yeah.
people or
Yes.
5 people, 10
Yes.
people, like the
Mhm.
right size the amount. Like you can do the process mapping and the time evaluation to say how long does it really take, and it literally takes more than the 40 hours anyway. But
Yeah.
going back to Lori though, like, so I wonder, Rachelle, you could tell me if this is a reasonable application for Lori, is get the boys' schedules for all of their sports events, put it on the calendar with the travel time, and that's block time
Oh,
and is not
absolutely.
Yep.
available on your
Yep.
time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is it's so funny you say that. I mean, I absolutely have learned that that's like a big piece of what I have to do. You know, I have multiple calendars. So I'm blocking on multiple calendars. So this client can see when I'm going to be available, when I'm not going to be. I do that. And I find that it's really been helping me by kind of just blocking it out. Yeah. Are there those situations where like sometimes I just can't say no and I'm still doing it, but I have gotten better at it. And I think that's like a good thing.
Yeah.
I would say if you asked me like when I first started doing this to now, have I gotten better at it? 100% I have. But I think the one thing that I still lack is trying to find that time for me, right? So Rachelle, when you say like, what is your thing that makes you like, what's your hobby? Which, you know, my hobby is watching my sons play baseball. Like, truthfully, that's what it is right now. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I adore it. And it actually makes me feel like decompressed. I'm pretty calm when I'm sitting there. But you know, could I do more for truly me personally? Yes, I probably could. And I think that's like, I think, listen, no one's perfect. I think we all have those things we want to change and be better. And for me, that's like it. That is the one thing I want to do
What's the
differently.
one activity you miss doing that you'd like to do again?
Oh my gosh. You know, when people ask me that, and I hate to say this, but for like the past 15 years, I don't know. Like I think I have to find what gives me passion.
Okay.
You know, in full honesty, I don't think I have a good answer because I think I've changed as a person, right?
Yeah.
After you become a mother. And I don't think I have a good answer as to what that thing would be, you know?
So you would definitely benefit from working with a coach for a little bit to rediscover it. So
Yeah.
just to kind of share how I work it in, my passion, my biggest tank filler is going shelling and finding shells. And that's part of the reason why I moved to the area. So I literally will I'll look at the Tide calendar first for the next like month, 6 weeks. And I'll find one that's at a reasonable hour that I can, in the morning. I'll block it on my calendar for like 3 or 4 hours. So, I'm blocking it a month out. I don't have anything confirmed yet. So I'll cancel whatever's there. I'm at the beach and I'm shelling. That fills my tank for a good 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. And I can't complain. So finding that one thing and making time for it, treat it like an appointment with your most important, put it on your calendar like the most important client, an appointment with your most important client, which is yourself. And you're doing that now with your kids' games, which is great. What about date night with your husband? When was the last time you guys had a date night?
No, I know you're absolutely right. It's
Plan it
just
a month out, put it on the calendar, block it, make it happen. Seeing girlfriends.
right.
So one of the big things I'm doing is I'm for the first time I'm going to be getting an office outside the home, and the irony for me is that I have to go to the office for balance. Like I think we pendulum swung, you know, it's like, oh, the corporate is like burning us out, but I think being at home and isolated is also burning me out, you know, in addition to all the changes. And I'm so excited because like where I have my office is like there's a coffee shop and there's restaurants and there's a library down the street. And I think one of the disciplines I want to start adding is taking a true lunch hour. You know, not like enough of a lunch hour where I run downstairs, make something to eat, shove it in my mouth in between meetings or in between tasks, but it's like take a lunch hour. I used to love that. Like when I first started my business, there wasn't the same kind of pressure. Like we had Blackberries, but there wasn't like this pressure 24/7 connectivity. And I remember having like really good conversations with colleagues and friends. We'd go to Einstein's or do whatever. And it's like that's almost feels like a luxury now rather than, well, why not? When I was in corporate, I had lunch with colleagues all the time. I had lunch with people and we would talk shop, and it created ideas and all of that stuff. And I'm so excited to have neighbors. Like I have in my new office space, I'm going to have a massage therapist across the hall. I'll have a meditation person, a nurse practitioner. I have a yoga, like a trauma informed yoga person, acupuncturist, like all in this little area. And it's like, I'm sure I'm going to get 1,000 ideas that being at home. So I wonder, like, just Rachelle is like, we're moving towards it. And I know we've been on for a while, what recommendations of like how to like the staying at home all the time is also not balanced either. So it's like, how do you address that? And what other recommendations did you make?
You have to create that balance. I love what you're doing, that you're going to an outside office. I actually know a few people that do that, and it works for them because the noise in their home is not productive for them. They're energy drainers, or they'll be working all the time. To your point, you go back, Laura, you said you go back to the office at 9 o'clock at night, you go into your office and you keep working. That's not a good use of your time. I love going back to the office, but the number one thing is really, it's the boundaries and it's the self-care. There's no secret sauce here. There really isn't, but they are choices. And
I'm sorry. Let's go ahead.
No, people don't teach you how to set boundaries. Boundaries come with trade-offs. So when Lori says yes to a Zoom meeting during one of her son's game, her trade-off is she doesn't get to see the game.
Right.
And is that acceptable? Will you tolerate it, or will you not accept that? You get to choose one of the three. Yeah. So if you tolerate it, then it's okay on occasion. But if it's okay, your boundaries going to be just trampled over.
So in terms of like the prescription, let's try to summarize the prescription. So this is what I heard us talk about today. Number one, we need to start talking about burnout and destigmatizing that part. That's number one. And then number two, we need to recognize the signs of when we are getting ready to have burnout before it becomes bad. So when we start hating our jobs, or we're not excited anymore, we start feeling resentful or the emotional drain, we nip it in the bud before it gets bad, and don't apologize for not being happy with our jobs anymore. It sounds like three, like so that we could avoid the really bad stuff like the, car accidents and, heart attacks and all of that. Three, get clear on our values so that we can make sure that our work and our life aligns with our values. So without that clarity, so maybe when I started my career, I had this set of values, but they've evolved over time and now I have this set of values. So getting really explicit about those. And if my career, my 9-to-5 corporate career does not align with my values, I need to create a 6-month plan, get some money in the bank, work with a coach or mentors, people like us, to make that transition plan, which is a container that can create the self-care. And then number 5 is like making sure that when you are setting up your business, you put your priorities into your calendar first.
Build your business around your life. Don't build your life around your business.
Absolutely.
And so for you, Rachelle, it's about shelling and beach and all of that. For you, Lori, it's about your kids' games and being there for your kids, or whatever those values are. That's in your calendar, and it is like as important as the biggest CEO meeting or the biggest client meeting of your life. And then it's really like, from my perspective, like one of the things I work a lot with my clients around is making sure you have products and services that you actually want to deliver, that won't drain you, that won't replicate the stuff you don't like. Do stuff that you actually like. And then it sounds like there's something else, Rachelle, you were talking about with this daily self-care and the recovery. Can you kind of like fill in the gaps of the summary?
So your daily self-care it's the taking care of your physical body, taking care of your spiritual or mental well-being. Those are so important. I like to say we're a 3-legged stool. We have our physical health, we have our spiritual and emotional health, and then we have our mental health. And this is something that people are talking about more and more. Again, something else we have to break the stigmatism on is mental wellness, mental health, mental fitness. So, and we don't work that muscle. We just don't. So it's got to be all three. Because a 3-legged stool, all 3 legs have to be the same length in order for the stool to stand strong.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, Lori, the irony here with this burnout thing is we're talking about it personally. Your business is all about helping organizations right size their strategic priorities so the organization doesn't crash and burn and get
Mm-hmm.
overtaxed. So that's kind of ironic given our conversation.
I
But
know, right?
can you just just share a little bit about your business and how people can find out a little bit more about you and what your website address is?
Absolutely. So as we talked about a little bit before, I really built my business around, what I found I spent most of my career doing, and that is trying to help complex organizations find a balance between all of the parts of that organization and how they work together the most efficiently and the most effectively. So the business that I created, Lori Smith Consulting, so that's my website, lorismithconsulting.com, was really based on that. It's based on, creating priorities amongst all of the strategies that you have as an organization, putting the things that have the highest return to the top, making sure that those things that, really spend a whole lot of time on and that you're not getting that return from, that they fall to the bottom. It's around strategy and giving, more focus to thinking forward. I talked about sustainability of my own business. I think it's so important that businesses have sustainability themselves when it comes to, whether you're just part of a small department or, the bigger picture of the entire organization. I think having that forward looking plan and not just focusing on, the next 6 to 12 months is so important. Businesses have to have that strategy, that outlook. And I really, spent a lot of my time trying to help businesses do that. And then I think the last piece is working together, right? So that's the one thing that again, really makes me, I think, a little bit unique, maybe to other consultants, is that I like to make sure that not only the processes are working together, but the people are working together. And I really enjoy spending time with people and getting to know, them individually and figuring out how they fit into the puzzle of an organization to try. Because to me, you said it before, Betsy, right? Organizations and a lot of corporations, it's all about their biggest asset, which is the people. So it's trying to figure out how you get those people working together more effectively. So, yeah, so that's really where I spend a lot of my time, and I enjoy, the fact that I get to do this on a regular basis now, and I don't have to, work on things that don't make me happy. I think that's the key and the best part about being a consultant, right? Is you get to really pick and choose what makes you happy.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Rachelle, can you want to share a little bit about what your business is all about and how people can get a hold of you?
Right. So I am a leadership coach and also a mental fitness coach and a burnout expert. I actually do lean very heavily into the hospitality world. My goal is to bring humanity back to the hospitality industry through positive intelligence and mental fitness. I love coaching, working with people one-to-one and helping them really navigate balance so they can really have the thriving careers they want. So my websites are stoneconsulting.com. I do speak at a lot of conferences, both on burnout prevention versus recovery and also on mental fitness. So, and I just love it. It's fantastic. I love working with people and helping them see watch them change and have the lives they finally want to live. So
Awesome. Well, you've been instrumental in helping me take responsibility for my own burnout and not feel bad about it. So thank you.
don't feel
So
bad about it.
as we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to talk to me about as it relates to burnout, avoiding burnout, transcending burnout, or just the burnout and entrepreneurship? And I just didn't ask you the right question.
Oh, I think we need a whole nother session for that.
Oh,
We
great.
can really talk about this. There's so much here. And there's so much that we've not tapped into yet. That it takes time. So I'm happy to talk to you again on another time and share with your listeners more info.
Awesome. What about you, Lori? What do you think?
No, it's so funny. I think when we jumped on this call today, right, our path of our discussion, while it started out just casually talking about ourselves and how things were going, turned into a burnout discussion. And I actually love the fact that the three of us can do that, and that we, you know, feel comfortable enough to talk about burnout and to talk about our journeys together, because I think, you know, we said it before, I think it's so overlooked, and I think it does become something that people just don't feel comfortable talking about. So having that comfort zone, and being able to find people that you feel comfortable having that conversation with, I think would be my last bit of advice to anyone out there, whether you're working in entrepreneurship or whether you are working in that corporate environment. I just think it's such an important part of, you know, your well-being. So even if I haven't found my personal passion, I think, you know, having this environment is one of the things that I think is wonderful for me. And I'm, you know, very lucky to have that in the two of you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
and
a lot of great resources out there too, for
Mhm.
sure. Books, articles, podcasts, really powerful stuff.
And I think the one thing that I really took away from the conversation is to destigmatize it. If you're
Mhm.
feeling, you know, that cynicism, that exhaustion, it's like, instead of feeling like I'm pathologized or I'm depressed, I got to get on anti-anxiety medicine. It's like, maybe you're burnout. And so one of the early signs is you don't like your work anymore. So it's time to change, and it's okay. You know, what
Yep.
got you here isn't going to get you there. Just because you loved it before doesn't mean that that's the next chapter. And I love what you said, Rachelle, too, about just like paying attention, tuning into your values, tuning into who you are is huge. And maybe that's like the secret that goes beyond, is if you create that self-care routine, you're going to be able to do that. So thank you both so much. This has been hugely helpful. I know there's a ton of people who are probably experiencing the same things that we all experience, and we'll get a lot from this conversation. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Betsy.
All right.